On the 23rd of November 1963, British audiences witnessed a new programme on their televisions. The first part in a 4-episode series about the time-travelling adventures of a man and his granddaughter in what appeared to be a blue police telephone box. This was Doctor Who, and little did anyone know that it would still be running to this day, 50 years and 11 incarnations later.
What are you doing here? I'm quite spry for my age, actually. There's no point in being grown up if you can't be childish sometimes. You know, we can sort all this out in no time at all if everyone just stays calm. That's a nice nap. Now, down to business.
Hello listener, my name's Dr. Chris Darby, and it's my absolute pleasure to introduce you to a very special episode of Digital Wanderlust, a series from InRetroSpect podcast that chronicles the relationship between psychogeography and video gaming. In this episode, we're going to be looking at some of the games of the Mad Man in a Blue Box. I say we, because every time traveller needs a companion. Joining me on my journey through time and space is Daniel Frost.
Hello, I am your Sarah Jane to your Doctor.
As Dan is host of Freeplay, another monthly show from InRetroSpect, which devotes itself to free gaming, we thought we'd look at the free Doctor Who games you, listener, can download without having to pay a penny. Welcome to the Games of the Doctor.
Would you like a jelly, baby?
Now, Dan and I are the resident Doctor Who fans of the team, and in this show we're going to discuss why we love this programme and our experiences of the game within its universe. But first off, I think what's important is to kind of really discuss how we first became acquainted with Doctor Who and who our Doctor is.
Well, I think for me, there may well be people listening to this who are proper kind of devoted Doctor Who fans who've listened through all of the years. I would have to say I'm not one of those, and that's because I really only got into Doctor Who when it was kind of rebooted with the Christopher Eccleston series. And even then, I didn't really get into it then. At that point, I thought it was kind of a kids' show, so I didn't really get into it. It wasn't until like halfway towards the end of the David Tennant era and then fully into the Matt Smith era that I've really enjoyed it and really got to know what's great about Doctor Who and all the kind of the intricacies and the subtleties of it. You say there, who's my Doctor, and it's the same kind of thing with like a James Bond. Who's your James Bond? I struggle to pick who my Doctor is, and that's because I flip between David Tennant and Matt Smith. When I'm watching Matt Smith, I look at him and think, you are fantastic. This kind of brilliant portrayal of this character.
It's a fez. I wear a fez now. Fezzes are cool.
This is like the perfect incarnation. And then I'll watch another episode of David Tennant.
I'm the Doctor. I'm a Time Lord. I'm from the planet Gallifrey in the constellation of Kasterborous. I'm 903 years old, and I'm the man who's going to save your lives and all 6 billion people on the planet below.
Where some of his more serious episodes, and I think actually, no, this is brilliant. I really struggle to pick between them because they both, at moments, are absolutely perfect, and I love the interpretations of the character from both actors completely different, but I love both of them equally, and I really struggle to pick which one, so thanks for making me choose.
It's like choosing between your children.
I don't know whether to feel flattered or insulted.
So what is it for you that makes Doctor Who special, Dan? What makes it stand out from other TV series out there?
For me, I think it's the kind of quintessential sci-fi for one, and it kind of sits up there with all like the big sci-fi TV shows, whether that's Star Trek or a lot of the big American sci-fi shows. For me, the best thing about Doctor Who is its Britishness, kind of the core of it. They'll have a cup of tea, the running around London in the underground. It's the humour, a lot of it, the humour that comes out of it, especially in the Matt Smith era. And as well with David Tennant, but with Matt Smith era, the humour is really, really, really nice, and it's the whole. I can't get away from the fact that it is the Britishness of it that I'm really fond of, and that really kind of has an impact with me. That it's can be quite quaint, but also it's on such a big, massive scale that it is. I mean, some of the episodes do stand up in like with huge, big CGI set pieces. I mean, to go into, you look at, I think the finale of Matt Smith's first series, where you have him at Stonehenge, we're surrounded by all the enemies in the galaxy, and you look and think this scene is absolutely incredible. And this is just a little BBC One Saturday night hour-long sci-fi show, but it's absolutely fantastic and such big budget. And it's that juxtaposition between the big budget and the funny little in-jokes of having a cup of tea. And that's what I like. That's what kind of is nice about it for me.
I think, yeah, I totally agree. And without having to be stereotypical, I think that we in Britain, we really love eccentric people. And the Doctor Who is like the quintessential eccentric Englishman in some regards. And I totally get that. It is this kind of love letter to England as well. It kind of embraces all that is a little bit odd and quirky about Britain.
Always do what you're best at, that's what I say. Now, come on.
For me, my relationship with Doctor Who is kind of like the same as yours, Dan. I came to it quite late. But it was only when I was looking back on it really recently that I realised that actually it has kind of cropped up in my life. Most people listening to here, they'll have got parents that have kind of talk about how they were terrified of Doctor Who. And my parents were exactly the same. My mother wasn't allowed to watch it, and if she did catch it, she'd have to hide behind the sofa because she was terrified of it. You know, the Daleks, they still have that sense of fear now. Even I kind of tap into that. I asked my nan who her Doctor Who was. I think it was John Pertwee, she said was her Doctor Who.
So you really ought to try this gorgonzola cheese. It's absolutely delicious.
But I just remember as a child flicking on the BBC as a kid, and I remember seeing it was Peter Davison in like a drama that looked particularly interesting. I didn't know what it was.
I'm very fond of history, but I don't usually get much time for reading.
I think it was in Egypt or something. I didn't know what that was, and I think I found out years later that it was the Fifth Doctor. It was Doctor Who. So my first ever Doctor that I actually saw was Peter Davidson, the Fifth Doctor, and then I think I saw a rerun of an episode with the Third Doctor, John Pertwee, in his incredible kind of like not flowery shirt, but kind of like the cravat kind of like shirt. But for me, my Doctor really has got to be Christopher Eccleston, the Ninth Doctor.
I can feel it. The turn of the earth. The ground beneath our feet is spinning at 1,000 miles an hour, and the entire planet is hurtling round the sun at 67,000 miles an hour, and I can feel it. We're falling through space, you and me, clinging to the skin of this tiny little world, and if we let go, that's who I am.
And that was when I was at university. My university girlfriend, she introduced me to Doctor Who, and I just totally took to it. I'd heard about the reboot, and I just thought it looked a bit odd and a little bit geeky, too geeky for me. And she showed it to me, and I just took to it. Because the thing I love about it is it never tries to be bigger than it actually is. You have those wonderful, there's moments of brilliance with special effects and CGI, but also you get those odd episodes where they just don't care about the CGI, and they just embrace the fact that it's a low budget and you have to really use your imagination. And you kind of take it all with a big pinch of salt, which makes you love it even more, I find.
Yeah, for every big CGI set piece, there's an episode dedicated to 3 people in a room.
Exactly.
Type kind of episode.
And that's what I really love about Doctor Who because of that fact. But Christopher Eccleston's Doctor, I think one of the reasons I love him because he was only there for one series, and I really wanted to see more of him. But just his whole attitude to it, I just found really refreshing and really quite funny. How he could just, the click of your fingers go from very serious protector of the universe to just joking around, having a laugh.
Yeah, and I think what he did with that is that's something that both David Tennant and Matt Smith have continued with. I think maybe David Tennant a bit more than Matt Smith has, but that's something that he definitely brought in when he came in. And the idea of almost of the Doctor being like an action hero at times, I think he personified the idea of like an action hero more so than the other two. I mean, yes, David Tennant ran around a lot, but there wasn't the sense of kind of the grown up as there was with Christopher Eccleston.
No, I mean, I'll give you an example. I think one of the scariest ever Doctor Who episodes was the one that was set in World War II. In Blitz London, you've got that child with the gas mask. Mommy. But then you'll get the next episode, which will just be a comedy, and like every episode will be a different genre, which I think is something really important to remember when we start talking about the games. Really, how one of the reasons why Doctor Who has lasted for 50 years is because it shamelessly draws from a rich kind of tapestry of different genres, and combines them and fuses them into something quite new and exciting. So I think that's one of the reasons why it's had that kind of lasting impression on me. It constantly reinvents itself. It constantly regenerates every week.
And when you take a main character in a different direction, like they can with this character, then it can change the entire show, and it can make it more adult, or it can make it more childish. And they have so many areas that they can play with that enables it to maintain its consistency by constantly changing.
It isn't just a matter of not being frightened, you know.
What is it then?
It's being afraid and doing what you have to do anyway.
Okay, so let's talk about games then. And not surprisingly, Doctor Who has had quite a serendipitous selection of games. The first game that was released within the universe was Doctor Who: The First Adventure back in 1983. And that was on the BBC Micro, and that featured the Fifth Doctor. And really what that kind of was several different mini-games within it that kind of borrowed from templates of other games. So you had kind of a Doctor Who version of Pac-Man, Frogger and Space Invaders and battleships thrown into the mix. And as we work our way through 1985, you've got games on the Commodore 64, Doctor Who and the Mines of Terror, Doctor Who and the Warlord, same year. That was a text-based adventure. The one before it was a side-scrolling adventure. Dalek Attack in 1992 on the PC, Spectrum and the Commodore 64. And then 1997, Destiny of the Doctors on Windows. And that's really quite interesting because if you remember about it, the show kind of went on hiatus after Sylvester McCoy's series, and then we had the 1996 film with Paul McGann. And it was we had like a massive gap from 1996 to Christopher Eccleston as the Ninth Doctor in the 2000s. So it's quite interesting that a Doctor Who game came out then in 1997. And then we have the huge gap until 2010 with Doctor Who Return to the Earth, which features Matt Smith's Doctor on the Wii, and Evacuation Earth the same year on the Nintendo DS. Last year, the 2012, we had Doctor Who The Eternity Clock on PS3, Windows and the Vita, and most recent of all, the MMO Worlds in Time in 2012. The games I haven't mentioned are the ones we're going to talk about now, because this is a combination between me and Dan's respective shows, Freeplay and Digital Wanderlust. We have decided to focus, as I said before, on the Doctor Who games that you can download for free right now from the BBC website. I went online and I played all the mini-games you can find up there. And these mini-games are primarily from the David Tennant series. And they're kind of like the first ever Doctor Who game. They just really emulate other types of games out there, like Battleships and Frogger, that kind of thing, and Pac-Man. And they have a very short lifespan. They're generally feel as if they're being phoned in, but the one thing I do like is they kind of tie into episodes that we've already seen, so there is some element of detail there as well. So I don't really want to dwell on those too much. What I really want to come to are the games that started coming out in 2010 with City of the Daleks, which was released by BBC Wales Interactive and Sumo Digital, and that was the first part in what was supposed to be 2 series of games. It ended up becoming just 1 series of 4 games and a bonus game that came out in 2011. And these games all feature the current 11th Doctor, Matt Smith.
I'm the Doctor.
So we've played these games. I've played a selection. I know you, Dan, have played all of them. What did you make of them?
They're a bit of a mixed bag. I think. The kind of the grouping of them is Doctor Who: The Adventure Games, and in it we've got City of the Daleks, Blood of the Cybermen, TARDIS, Shadows of the Vashta Nerada, and the Gunpowder Plot. If we just start at the start, I think one of the weakest of them was actually City of the Daleks, and I think one of the reasons for that could be that they weren't quite sure where they were going with it. And I know they all kind of came out at similar times, but there's I found a very different feeling between City of the Daleks and the next one, Blood of the Cybermen, which is actually one of my favourite of the 5. The thing that I think they do very well, which I think is probably the main aim of these games, is they do feel like Doctor Who episodes, and they do feel as though you're taking part in the episode itself. I mean, production values, I mean, the graphics are okay. They're not fantastic, but they're perfectly fine. There's nice effects. They recreate the opening titles for it, where you're going through the column of all the smoke, and then the names, the actors' names are coming towards the screen, and you're following the TARDIS as it goes through. It's like a vortex type thing. And I think they do give you the impression of the episode very well, and I think that's probably the best. I mean, that's one of the things they're going for more than anything, and that's something they are, I think, successful about. Well,
it's really funny, actually. After playing those mini-games, I was really pleasantly surprised by this. I put the first episode, game on late at night, expecting it to be just a short mini-game before bed, and I was pleasantly surprised it actually has got quite a long duration. And as you say, Dan, they do feel like episodes. You know, you've got the main title sequence. You're playing along with an actual story here that's separate from the film TV series, and the fact that also you have Matt Smith and Karen Gillan doing the actual voices of their characters, which really adds something nice to it, as compared to what you have in the mini games, which is just clips that they've just taken from the episodes, just recycled. This was something that actually the actors have gone into a booth and recorded. And yeah, while I agree that the graphics they don't really sync up with the quality of the voice acting, and you have that kind of dead-eye kind of look to the characters.
Just on that point, one of the problems I actually had with it was actually the voice acting. Looking at it, you've got Matt Smith and Karen Gillan, who appear in the first 4 episodes, and in the 5th one, the Gunpowder Plot, you have Matt Smith, Karen Gillan, and also Arthur Darvill in the Roy Williams character. They're all very good actors. We know this. However, for some reason, the voice acting in this is very stunted, and it doesn't fit together. It feels very. You can very clearly hear the fact that they're not in the same place when they're recording these voiceovers. No. I know, obviously, in most voice acting work, the actors are never usually in the same room. I understand that. However, usually you don't hear that when you listen to it.
1963. Such a good year.
That's the year you bought that outfit, then?
You know, we can go to see the Beatles play in 1963, but the Ice Age is only a click away on the dial.
Can I meet John Lennon?
What?
Whereas here, I could very much hear difference in volumes, not volumes, but kind of the pitch and the tone of the voices wasn't quite matching up, whereas maybe Karen Gillan in the Amy Pond character was quite loud and kind of energetic. At the same time, the Matt Smith character was quite sombre and it just didn't quite match up, and that I felt quite jarring. There were occasional moments where it did kind of click, and I thought, yes, here we go. This maybe they fixed it, but again, it then kind of went back into the same kind of pattern, and that's one of my biggest disappointments about it, and that's purely because when you've got the actors there, it's disappointing that they're not able to perform in the way that you would expect them to.
I totally agree. It did seem almost as if they'd just done one take of their recording, the voices. And it did, as I said before, it did feel a little bit phoned in. But it was quite a nice surprise. I wasn't expecting that. So the games grew on me, actually. And it wasn't necessarily because of the kind of tasks I was doing, although I did actually enjoy some of the little mini-game components within it. Mm-hmm. The thing I liked was the whole collectibles aspect of it. Because one of the things that I really love about Doctor Who as a series, which is something it can do more so than any other series out there, is how it can reference itself. It like we see it often. We see like the odd kind of object picked up by the Doctor that links back to one of his previous incarnations, or we'll see a character come out of the past that he met ages ago. Like, for example, in the recent series of Matt Smith, you have Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart's daughter has now a character. She's now head of unit, and very similar to kind of that relationship between the Doctor's third incarnation, John Pertwee, and her father, Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart, in that kind of series. And that kind of referencing back and forth is so lovely here. And when you pick up a collectible, it'll say things like, oh, you've got this particular enemy, or you've got this particular object, or you have the first Doctor. And those kind of people are now almost become part of the same universe as the kind of the 11th series Doctor, as it were. And this kind of 50-year kind of lifespan is played around with and manipulated, almost like as the kind of the series does play around with time in that kind of manner. So that's what kind of really kind of struck a chord with me, I suppose. Every card I'd find, I'd suddenly get an area from the past.
It also taught me stuff that I didn't know about Doctor Who, and it gave me information that I didn't know about some of the earlier Doctors, because obviously I hadn't watched those series. But on that same point, I think my favourite point of the entire 5 games was in the third game, TARDIS.
The inside's bigger than the outside?
And in that, in the character of Amy, you're sent to the drawing room in the TARDIS, and you have to go and find it. And when you get there, this is kind of the Doctor's study. And throughout this room, there's all these different items from Doctor Who history. Hanging up, I'm not sure which Doctor it is, but one of the Doctor's stripy, colourful scarf hanging up on the side.
Oh, Tom Baker's.
Tom Baker's scarf hanging up on a coat hook. There's from, I think, David Tennant's final episode, when the Time Lords come back. The main Time Lord, played by Timothy Dalton, his staff, that's there in the room, and all these different elements that are really nice to see, and you can go back and you interact with them, and it gives you a bit of information about where this has come from. And then also, you've got all those, but then also in that episode, because you've already had City of the Daleks and Blood of the Cybermen before then, there are actually items in the room from those 2 games as well, so bringing those in, including them with the entire history of Doctor Who. And I thought, I love that part, and I wish there was more in there, because I went in that room, even though I was supposed to find a particular item. I spent ages just reading everything and looking at everything there, because I just found it really interesting, and it was a really nice idea to be able to explore the history of the Doctor. And it's something that the game did very, very well. It's a very good decision to do that, because this is what people wanted to do with these games. You want to explore the world of the Doctor, and when you're in the TARDIS, that's what you want. You want to see beyond the main room. That's all you ever see, and that's what you want to see. Where does the Doctor spend his time when he's not at the console? And this tells you. I thought that was one of my favourite bits of the entire kind of quintology of games, that, if you will.
I think I want to stick with the TARDIS, because I totally agree, that was one of my favourite moments as well. I was initially a little bit disappointed because I didn't actually get to explore the TARDIS properly, because in true Doctor Who fashion, there's kind of like something that's been written into the plot, so when you try to go up a staircase and exit the kind of main console area, it brings you back for another entrance, because there's some kind of problem with time, and the only real room you can access outside of there is this kind of drawing room. But as you say, Dan, it is this wonderful kind of treasure trove of mementos from the Doctor's kind of past. There's the fob watch from series 3 of the new series of David Tennant, where he kind of holds that kind of his personality when he becomes John Smith in that really, really amazing episode. There's that book he keeps when John Smith has those kind of dreams of his former identity as the Doctor. And these are all there in one place. It's a wonderful thing to experience. I think the highlight for me, though, was towards the end of that level, it just tells you to kind of explore the console. You're thinking, okay, well, that's just been thrown there to pad out the gameplay time. So you highlight a particular lever or button, saying it tells you what it does, and you don't bother to take it in. And then you go to continue on with the game, and it says, okay, you've got 60 seconds to start up the TARDIS and get it ready to go into time travel, and you've got to press these particular levers and buttons in a certain way, just like they do in the episode when he's running around and he's twisting knobs and pulling levers and pressing buttons. You've got to do that yourself, which was great fun. And it was a really nice moment and a lovely way to end that game. You are literally kind of controlling the TARDIS and taking it on. And it's that kind of thing I love about video games. In a similar way to how you can explore 1940s Los Angeles in LA Noire, you can't do that now. You couldn't do that in the real Los Angeles. You can actually now fly the TARDIS.
One day, I shall come back. Yes, I shall come back. Until then, there must be no regrets, no tears, no anxieties. Just go forward in all your beliefs and prove to me that I am not mistaken in mine.
And that brings me to this idea of kind of the control system. I found it quite an easy control system to get along with, actually, which was one of the reasons why I stayed with the game so much, really.
I think all the best parts of this are where it's being a game. And it's the elements that it's bringing in, just even the collectibles and stuff, that's a gaming element that they're bringing in. And I think control-wise, I think after the first 5 minutes of trying to get used to having almost sole control with the mouse, I was absolutely fine with it. And I'd vary between using the mouse, holding down the right button, and then using the up, down, left, right keys. But it was very easy because just you naturally, once you're about 5 minutes into it, I'm used to holding down the forward key and just slowly moving around with the mouse and just side to side, and you don't have to do anything major. It's not too complicated, and it is very simple. And I think one of the reasons for that is these are games that are going to be aimed at children and a younger demographic, so you can't put anything too advanced into them, too complicated in there. You've got up, down, left, right, you've got movement of the mouse, and you've got the space bar, and that's it. Everything else you just direct on screen. You press a button when it tells you to press a button, and I was more than happy with it. The only thing I'd say about the control scheme is in the first 4 games, one of the options is to hold down the right mouse button to move forward. That's removed in the 5th one for some reason. I don't really know why. Maybe they thought it wasn't working right, but in the 5th game you have to use the up, down, left and right, which was fine. It was just an interesting decision that they decided that one type of control scheme wasn't working for them.
Yeah, it's interesting because the 5th game, which is, he says, the Gunpowder Plot, which came out in 2011, that won several awards. I think it got a BAFTA possibly. I don't know, but it got quite a poor response from players, which is one of the reasons why they discontinued the series. But in terms of looking at the series as a whole, they're actually, I mean, you say the games are aimed at children. There are actually some quite nice kind of game mechanics within that you know that are a little bit taxing. I'm thinking, for example, in the first game where you're kind of in a stealth mode kind of cat and mouse game with the Daleks, but getting to try and kind of Metal Gear Solid your way around the Daleks was quite an interesting kind of process. But then you'll have the kind of 3D platforming kind of stealth, but then it'll move to kind of where you have to really concentrate, where you have to kind of move components through a maze without letting it touch the sides, otherwise you'll have to start again. So it really kind of, it draws, kind of like how the series draws from a myriad of different genres. It's the same for the games. It draws from lots of different type of gaming mechanics to kind of keep you interested. And because I've only played the first and the third game, does that kind of repertoire of gaming genres kind of increase? Are there different types of games that move out, or is it more or less more the same, repeated throughout?
I think by and large, they are all within all the little mini games that you do. Often involve unlocking doors or something like that, or kind of reprogramming something. The only mini game that actually sticks throughout all of the games is where you have a kind of a circuit board that you have to redirect wires around, which I'm quite happy about because I thought that was the best one of the ones that they did. All the other games, they all live in the same family, but they have slight variations. For example, in Shadows of the Vashta Nerada, you have to open numerous doors, and in order to do that you have to watch a code being put in, and then you have to repeat the code. So he'll highlight 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you put in that code, which is very simple. And it's never particularly taxing. I think I got it right every single time. There was any issues with any of that. And so in terms of game mechanics, that they don't really change. But I was happy with them. They were all different. You never had the same thing, other than the circuit board. Never really had the same thing beyond one of the games, one of the episodes. But they're all very similar. The only kind of gameplay difference I had, which might be why the 5th game didn't do so well, is the 5th game felt quite different, and it felt a lot more. There was a lot more of you walking around looking for something, looking for a type of flower, or you had to look for a person. So you had to go and speak to as many people as you could, and they all pretty much said the same thing to you. Have you seen Charlie? Yes, I've seen Charlie. Charlie is this person. I haven't seen him in a while. Why didn't you speak to Barnaby? Where's Barnaby? I don't know. You speak to the next person, and they say the exact same thing. But you have to speak to everybody in order to get through that, and so it becomes quite repetitive, which is what the first 4 didn't do. You were constantly moving forward, and that's what I quite liked about them. Whereas with the 5th one, it did kind of just mill about a bit. I think the storyline was one of the better ones because they base it around the gunpowder plot. So that's a classic Doctor Who thing. They take a real life event, and then they twist it and they say, actually, this is what happened behind the scenes of it, which is something that they've always done. They always do really well, and that's what the game did really well. Unfortunately, the gaming aspect in that one, that kind of let it down a bit.
Sorry, can I ask again? You mentioned a mistake with me.
Oh, big mistake. Really huge. Didn't anyone ever tell you there's one thing you never put in a trap if you're smart, if you value your continued existence, if you have any plans about seeing tomorrow, there's one thing you never ever put in a trap.
And what would that be, sir?
So in terms of like the games as a whole then, would you recommend that our listener go out and play a particular game in the series, or do you reckon it's worth their while to play them from start to finish, 1 to 5?
I think there are elements that you will get from playing all of them. My favourite of all of them is TARDIS, which is the 3rd game, and I think any proper Doctor Who fan, I say proper, I mean people who are really big fans of it, any person with a passing interest may enjoy these games if they like Doctor Who. But if you've got a really passion for Doctor Who and you know all about the history and you've been watching it for years, I think TARDIS you'll really enjoy, just for that nostalgic aspect of being able to look through the Doctor's things and see stuff, and just to have things mentioned, and in your mind you're thinking, of course that's him, that's when that happened, that's when this happened, and you're remembering what happened when you see these items. It's not a group of inanimate objects that you have no idea about. You've seen these before, and that's what I would say is the best one to look at. But in saying that is then enhanced by playing some of the other games. For example, something in Blood of the Cybermen, the 2nd game, then appears in that drawing room, so it kind of gives you an added element of depth to it. The one thing I really enjoyed from all the games, though, I have just have to say, is the use of music.
Oh yes.
And it works really, really well, and they use music really well, especially, I wouldn't be able to repeat and kind of replicate the music, but it's the moment where the Doctor does something good, and it's classic music from the Matt Smith, and whenever you get something right or you solve a puzzle, the music hits and it's dun, 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 and you're like, yes, that's it, and you've done it. And it's that kind of feeling of building up, and it's the classic music that works so well in the shows, and it works really well in this as well. And it works fantastically well, and that's for the music, and just for those kind of that little jolt of kind of, oh, that's awesome. I'd say we could play all the games, but if I had to pick for one of them, it would have to be TARDIS.
I totally agree. I think that, like I was talking about earlier, about one of the reasons why Doctor Who is bulletproof in some regards, is because we have such a warmth towards it generally. There's this wonderful sense of nostalgia, and this fact that some episodes, as we said, will be really polished. Some bits of it will be just a little bit, we'll have to take with a pinch of salt. But we don't mind, because it's Doctor Who and we love it. And it's the same with this game. There are moments in this game where you're thinking, ooh, that's a bit dodgy. And other bits you're like, oh, that's fantastic. Oh, yeah, I remember that. And it's totally the same. The fact that you're playing an episode, for want of a better word, all of these have been written by the same person, Phil Ford, so there's a sense of continuity amongst all the episodes. And having the voice actors there, aside of their ability, and having the music from Murray Gold, aside from the fact that it's often recycled throughout, it just makes it for me. And that's the reason why I recommend that you play this game, listener, if you are a Doctor Who fan. So having survived a Dalek-infested Britain in 1963 and fended off the Vashta Nerada in a subaquatic base, it's time for our trip in the TARDIS to come to an end. Before you return to 2013, or whatever year you're listening to us in, do yourself a favour and head over to InRetroSpectPodcast.com for a cornucopia of shows that each explore a facet of gaming. We're also on Stitcher Radio and YouTube as well. But if you just want to sit back and let us keep you posted, then subscribe to us on iTunes and follow us on Facebook or Twitter at InRetroSpect. Links to all of these, as well as the games we've discussed today, are of course available on our website, InRetroSpectPodcast.com. So my thanks to Dan for joining me on my journey, and thank you, listener, for deciding to hitch a lift. Here's to the Day of the Doctor. Bye. Bye.